1. I have lived in the same house my whole life. It's a small little one in Minnesota with 6 kids living in it. I have a few personal experiences that make me believe that it is haunted. I have a couple of memories of when I was younger that still do scare me a little. I used to share the upstairs bedroom with my older brother. The way it was set up is that the stairs led from the main floor of the house into a big open upstairs room with no walls. One night I was unable to fall asleep for some reason, when out of nowhere I hear 5 or 6 very loud stomping footsteps from the middle of the staircase. This freaked me the fuck out for 3 reasons. 1, my bed is right next to the staircase, so there's no way it could have been my brother, because I would have seen him walking towards the stairs. 2, the door was really loud, so I definitely would have heard it open. 3, the staircase is like 16 steps tall. So how and why could someone get halfway up without creaking the old floorboards, stomp 6 times and just stand there? The second occurrence in that room, I believe I actually saw whatever is in my house. I woke up in the middle of the night to some sound coming from my right. I rolled over and saw a faint outline of someone who I assumed to be my brother. That was until I heard him ask what I was doing from his half of the room. I glanced over to him, and in the moment I took my eyes off it, it was gone. That story still freaks me out. Luckily, when I was 11, I got to move to the main level and got my own room. I only had 2 experiences I can remember in that room. I started collecting vinyls when I was 14, so my dad let me take his turntable into my room. I should also add that around the time I was 13, I developed a weird habit of waking up in the dead of night in extreme panic for no apparent reason, almost having full-on panic attacks. One night I had one of these, so I was laying awake wallowing in self-pity when I heard some unfamiliar clicks coming from the shelf I had the turntable on. I assumed that they were just house sounds and ignored them. But a few days later I went to throw on a record, and I found the turntable and amplifier were both turned on. The needle for the turntable was even pushed towards the center of the table. My dad taught me to always turn everything off, and to never leave it spinning to not wear out the belt. I've always been good at following this rule, so I have no idea how to explain how it got to that state. The second one wasn't as weird, but personally a lot scarier. I had one of the most vivid nightmares I've ever had. I won't go into it too much detail, but I will say some of the things I saw still horrify me to this day. Luckily for me, I got awoken by someone softly saying, "Hey." But when I woke up, I also heard soft whispering coming from next to me. But when I checked, no one was there. It could have just me still being groggy, but it felt so much more real than that. My brother moved out the same day I turned 15. I was very excited for this, but during the moving process I had the most vivid experiences that make me believe my house was haunted. The room is in the basement, so me and my dad had to bring my furniture downstairs for an hour or 2. During that time, I decided to tell him about that turntable incident. He went silent, and when I was finished he said, "I've been thinking the house was haunted for years." He went on to talk about his own experiences. He told me about how he found a big circular fan flipped upside down in an impossible way. And my brother had a Thomas the Tank Engine pillowcase, and that he claimed the Thomas side gave him horrifying nightmares, and how he would get uncomfortable in the basement, for no reason at random times. He also said that he believes the old owner of the house murdered her husband because he found a vial of poison hidden away in a rafter in the basement. While we were talking, I suddenly got the worst case of chills of my life. At the exact same time I got them, he stopped talking. I quietly muttered, "I just got chills," and he replied, "So did I." I have a couple of experiences from the year I spent in the basement. I'll say first that those weird panic things I got in the night has started to get much worse. It's become an almost weekly occurrence. The first one that comes to mind is how one night I woke up and heard a weird tapping sound. I realized that it was some pattern repeating itself like Morse code. I ran upstairs and my dad was awake smoking a cigarette. I showed him an example of it and he said that it did definitely sound like Morse. I don't remember what the code was, but I'll be looking through some texts I exchanged with my friend in an attempt to find it again. Other than that, I've just had the occasional things falling over and lights flickering for no reasons. I hope that someone takes the time to hear this. I've always wanted to tell my experiences, but I always thought no one would believe me. If you did, I really appreciate it. If you've got questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Take care. Basic Core Kid. Additionally, I forgot to add a couple. I was locked out of my house, so I was just sitting at the back door waiting for someone to let me in. But I thought I heard my dad faintly calling Basic Core Kid help from the basement, so I ran around to the front of the house and pounded on the door. My dad answered it and asked what the hell I was screaming for. I told him how I heard him calling, and he claims that he heard me faintly calling to him from the basement. I swear I never even called for him once in that incident. Don't know how I forgot that one. It's one of my weirdest ones. Then there were times for a few months where I saw a small black figure running in my living room, almost like a small black cat. My dad thought I was crazy until he saw it and understood what I was talking about. I suppose it could have been a rodent, but if it was big, fast, and quiet. 2. I'm a 23-year-old male, but had a cluster of experiences around the age of 15 to 16 years old. I don't know why it was so clustered, and I'm very skeptical and try to reason with myself. I'm not really afraid of paranormal things, but find it interesting. Some of these are put under could be my perception, meaning I saw a glimpse of something and thought it was something that it wasn't. At the time, all these were fairly scary. Right now, if it were to happen to me, I don't know how I'd react. First experience was when I was 12. I audibly heard the TV playing after waking up in the middle of the night, and went to say hello to my parents. Everyone was asleep. 12 again. Went to use the toilet and noticed a dark figure outside just standing there. 14 to 15. Was very depressed and started to have recurring nightmares. The nightmare was always the same. I was stuck in my house and all the lights didn't work. It would always finish with some demonic figure jumping into my body to end the dream. Around this time, I would constantly wake up in the middle of the night to light tapping under my bed. Sometimes, instead of tapping, I'd have my sheets pulled completely over my head. It was Australian summer, so I would wake up because it was too hot and I couldn't breathe. For the record, it's been years since this and I've never done this. I honestly don't believe I pulled the covers over my head. Sometimes my arm would just jerk from under the covers to on top of the covers. Sometimes it would happen to my leg too. Reasoned with myself that this was just electrical spasms, even though a few times it was a full motion. I didn't do it. One night I woke up to my younger brother crying, 9 at the time. His room was across from mine, so I just told him to go back to sleep. I was a grumpy teenager. I noticed his figure at the front of my door. I followed his figure as he walked into my room and next to my bed. I assumed he was trying to turn on my lamp to get comfort from his crying. I waited a bit for him to go get it, but he just didn't, so I got out of bed, turned on the room light at the door. I remember clearly looking at this dark figure and thinking, wouldn't it be funny if nothing was there? And bam, light on, figure gone. My brother was standing in the middle of his room crying and jumped straight into bed when he saw me. I told him to go see my mum, and he ran out of the room still weeping. Once, while in the family room playing games with my grandparents and siblings, I heard this classical demonic voice right behind me. I could feel the breath. I thought it was my grandparents playing a prank on me, but when I turned around, we were completely fixated on my siblings playing games. This one I wasn't afraid, but it was very weird. I was just walking past my kitchen, and I just had a feeling to look at the clock. I did, and as if on cue, the minute hand moved 10 minutes forward on its own. I just sighed and thought, oh, the clock is not on time. So I moved the minute hand back to where it was. Last one. I just came home from being dropped off by my parents because I was about to be picked up by a friend to go out. My parents went back to the family outing that they were having at a park 20 minutes away. So I was 100% alone. During this time, I read books, so when I got home, I took off my shoes and placed my book on the kitchen counter. I placed my book so half of it was still hanging off the counter. Anyway, I walked into my room and heard a loud slap. I thought, ugh, my book must have fallen off the counter. But when I got to the kitchen, my book was still half hanging off. But instead, my shoes had been chucked across the room. Originally, they were next to the book, but instead had been thrown a couple of feet in opposite directions. I seriously considered that I was being attacked by demonic forces around this time, and I spoke out when my shoes got thrown across the room, and told it to leave in Jesus' name. After that, the experiences mostly stopped. I still had the occasional sleep paralysis, but that's it. My depression also magically lifted once the experiences stopped. Hence why I believe it's possible that it was just my perception, but I could just be hoping for that because it's easier to believe. Thanks for listening. 3. A number of years ago, I worked retail at an amusement park in New England. My job was basically to stock the 4 gift shops in the park and to organize inventory when it came in. During my first day in the park, I was assigned to place price tags on some inventory of shot glasses. I was working in the upstairs area of the gift shop you were forced to walk through when you exited the park. The upstairs was mostly storage, filled with boxes of clothes and other items that were stocked in the store. It had an attic vibe, as it felt unfinished, with just a narrow path to the back, like a labyrinth filled with boxes. Anyways, my supervisor brought me upstairs and showed me the simple task at hand, taking a sheet of price stickers and placing them on each shot glass as I took them out of the box they were initially shipped in. Almost immediately after my supervisor left, I started feeling this insane sense that somebody was watching me. I've heard people say that in films and other stories, but this time I truly understood what it meant. I kept looking over my shoulder and just wanted to get the fuck out of there. It's hard to convey in a story, especially to those who don't know me, but I've never been the type to be creeped out and was certainly never the kid afraid of exploring stereotypical scary places. Every single hair in my body was standing straight up. I had a slight chill feeling in the dead of a hot and humid summer. This was a feeling I assume you wouldn't understand unless you felt it before. I literally felt like the air was charged with electricity. I kept looking over my shoulder, not sure what I was even looking for. I proceeded with the job. I would take a sticker, put the barcode on the shot glass, and place it on a shelf in front of me. Once I stacked 5 on top of each other, I would create a new stack. Before I finished the first stack of shot glasses, I realized one had fallen off the shelf and shattered before me. The only thought I had at the time was, fuck, I already broke something on my first day. But I had come to realize later there is no reasonable explanation to how it fell in the first place. There were 4 shot glasses stacked on top of each other when this had happened. If one had fallen, the whole stack should have. Even after feeling strange energy the whole time, I wasn't thinking anything out of the ordinary was happening. I finished labeling the glasses and went back downstairs to the actual store, relieved that I was out of there. There was an older woman in my department who was working the register that day. I made a comment to her, "It's pretty creepy up there," without explaining what happened, and she simply responded with, "Yes, it is, and it's very, very haunted." I was suddenly hit with a very terrifying realization that everything I had felt made sense. Like I said, I was never creeped out by much, and wasn't just assuming there was a paranormal presence near me. I never felt energy like that in my life, and honestly haven't since. More unexplainable creepy things had happened to me in the park, as well as in that store, but I never felt that strange feeling in the air again. To be honest, I'm still not sure to this day if I believe in ghosts, but that was a terrifying experience. Not on paper, and not even much while it was happening, but every time I was forced to go back up there every day after. This isn't some crazy impressive story, but I can assure you, it is 100% true. And I can assure you that the glass that fell was on a stack. I later learned throughout my 3 years there that the park was rumored to be very haunted, as almost every employee there had a similar story to mine. 4. I just woke up from a reoccurring nightmare that I have about my late grandparents' home. So why not tell the tale? First, I'll give you a little bit of context. I, 24 female, grew up in West Virginia, as did my entire family. When I was a kid, I remember spending a lot of time with my paternal grandmother, Nana, and great-grandparents, Mama and Papa, while my mom and dad were working. The house in question is an old 3-level home that's been in our family for generations. Mama's father bought it when he came to America from Ireland sometime around the 30s. From the stories I've been told, this man was an evil son of a bitch, a hateful old man in every sense. I won't get into details, but just know his story contains sexual assault and domestic abuse. We believe he's the main spirit in the home, because it's one of those houses where as soon as you set foot inside, you're instantly filled with dread and despair. Then, as I mentioned above, both of my grandparents have passed. We think Mama is there too. She was also a mean old woman, but had the classic change of heart once I was born and treated me like gold. My Nana's 2 sisters and brother have also passed. Point being, there's a lot of ghosts up in that bitch. Now the experiences. The first one I remember personally was when I was maybe 7-ish and had just taken a shower. Like the nosy little kid I was, I started going through the cabinets for fun, when as clear as day in my left ear I hear my Mama's voice, who was dead at this point, to her famous tisk tisk, which meant, "You better get the fuck out of that cabinet." I whipped my head around so fast, thinking surely it was someone else, but no one was there. And only my Nana was downstairs watching TV. Then there's the shadow figure. Or guess it's the evil grandpa. Because when you see it, you just know it doesn't mean well. It always appears very tall, which evil grandpa was, and will just stand and stare at you as much as a shadow person can. The time I saw him was when I was sleeping in the guest bedroom, which, surprise, it's the room he died in. I remember waking up because I had to pee, but when I rolled over to get up, it was standing at the foot of the bed, just hovering over me. I remember feeling absolute terror. All I could do was pull the covers over my head and hope it would leave. One time, a friend of Nana's came over to grab something before she went to work. Whatever it was happened to be in Nana's car, so she went outside to grab it while the friend waited inside. No sooner than she got to her car, the friend ran out of the house screaming, saying there was a tall dark figure standing in the corner of the living room staring at her. Then there's the ritual footsteps every night around 3 a.m. Cliché, I know. It starts at the bottom of the steps. They stomp up the stairs slowly, pausing at the landing, then up the final 2 steps. Then they stomp slowly down the hallway, and rattle the doorknobs on each door until they get to the end of the hallway where it stops. And there's a lot more, but that's the gist. There's always the feeling of being watched and a persistent feeling you're not wanted in the house. Currently, it's sitting empty. Nobody in our family would dare to live there. As for the reoccurring dream, it's me running down the hallway away from the shadow figure. But it keeps stretching, and I can never get to the end. It always catches me. 5. Many years ago, I rented an old farmhouse after fleeing my relationship. The house was very cool. It had sloping ceilings in the second-floor bedrooms and gravity heat. Gravity heat means there are no heating ducts to the second floor, but instead has large holes in the main floor ceiling covered by elaborate wrought iron gates. This becomes relevant later. My friends helped me move in. One of my friends liked to make a big deal of the fact that he was born with a caul, an extra flap of skin over his face, which supposedly makes him psychic. As we were carting stuff in, he told me he had a funny feeling about the place, and thought it was probably haunted. I told him to shut up and stop trying to freak me out. I'd never lived alone before, and he knew it. The stairway to the second floor was too narrow and twisty to get my double bed up the stairs, so I made my bedroom on the main floor in the insulated front porch. My 5-year-old daughter slept upstairs. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but it soon became clear that despite being rewired before I moved in, the electrical system was a bit wonky. I went through light bulbs at a rate of a couple a week, and they wouldn't just burn out, they blew out. My old stereo fried, as did a TV and my vacuum cleaner. No big, they were all old, I thought. The elements on the stove cracking and arcing a shower of sparks was a little more disconcerting, though. Sometimes I'd find things in odd places, like my car keys in the laundry basket or a can of soup under my pillow. But I did have a 5-year-old, so despite being puzzled at the oddity of it, I never gave it too much thought. Also, the cats never went upstairs, but I just assumed it was because we'd never lived in a 2-story house before. Soon after moving in, my daughter developed an imaginary playmate, a little boy about her age. I could hear her upstairs through the heating vent in the living room playing and chattering for hours. I just thought it was cute. Only child and all that. Lastly, at the top of the stairs between the bedrooms was a closet. I couldn't get that door to stay shut no matter what I did. I could clearly hear the latch click closed when it shut. But that didn't seem to matter. I even tried forcing a wedge into the bottom only to find the door pushed open again on my next trip upstairs. This even occurred while my daughter was at school, so it couldn't have been her. One night after working an evening shift and getting my daughter into bed, I got ready for bed myself. As I was washing my face, I heard a giggle. I turned my wet face toward the door and I could see a little boy looking at me from the stairs. I grabbed my towel, wiped my face, and looked again in time to see a little brown shoe disappear over the top landing. I ran upstairs to find nothing but my daughter still in her bed, despite the fact that the boy I saw had short brown hair, and my daughter's was long and blonde. I decided that it was just because I had water in my eyes, and my daughter had to have been playing some sort of trick. By this time, though, I was starting to worry if I was losing my mind. I never told anyone else about the occurrences, except for the electrical surges, as I didn't want to end up in a straitjacket. Things continued in this manner for the 18 months I lived there. Finally, I saved enough for a down payment on my own place, and we moved. A month or so after I moved, I stopped by the old place to see if there was any mail. The new tenant, whom I had never met, was very pleasant and invited me in for tea. As we're sipping our tea, she casually asked me if I had ever met the little boy upstairs. I just about dropped my cup. It turned out she managed to get her bed up those stairs and was sleeping in the room my daughter had used. She told me that 3 days after she moved in, she woke up to find a little boy sitting at the foot of her bed. His name was Joseph, he told her. He was 6, and he died in the house. He'd also told her that he was locked in that closet as punishment sometimes, and that he hated it because it was dirty, dark, and cold. I finished my tea as fast as was polite and hightailed it out of there. Somehow, having my experience verified made it worse, not better. I wasn't nuts after all, but there was a sad, lonely little boy I could have befriended too. Had I known he was really there, and not just a figment of my daughter's imagination. I never went back again, but I still think of Joseph often. I hope he gets a new playmate someday. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 214. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, we're heading towards the halfway point in November now, and that's got me thinking about Christmas and New Year. Going to be different this year, although apparently good times are ahead. You know, there's seemingly vaccination that's quite effective on the way, but that's going to be a long time. You know, rolling out and eventually getting back to normal. It's not going to happen at once. So Christmas, New Year, definitely going to be different this year, and it's sad. But I expect I'll certainly touch base with family. But I'm very likely going to be doing a stream on New Year's Eve, and possibly one on Christmas Day in the evening. So, if you folks would like to join me for that, you'll get to see in the new year with me, and depending on how long we stream, I'll get to see it in with you, because I've got no other plans that night. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, Thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.